Purpose isn't just about what we do, it's about why we do it. Jeff McDonald is somebody who's spoken at several mental health events. Friend of Dave Turnbull's, speaks in big corporate settings. We're lucky. He normally charges about £3,000 a day, I think, and we had him for a whole weekend for free. Well, we gave him bacon rolls, I think, but and he has started. I think each time I've heard him, he's started with this question: what are the two most important days of your life? It's a Mark Twain. From Mark Twain quotes, and it's the day you were born and the day you find out why you were born. And many of us go through our lives never finding out why we're born, we're just getting through it, really. As I was growing up, I don't think I ever really considered purpose. I think as a kid, you don't think about purpose. You just think it's just survival when you're a kid growing up. You just kind of, how do I get on with these people that are around me without being bullied or where do I fit in? You're just completely self-absorbed as a child, I think. I think that's many children experience that. I don't fit anywhere. I remember as a kid feeling like, I don't seem to fit anywhere. I just felt like I didn't fit in any kind of circle or friendships or groups. But I had some friends and things, but I always felt like I was the one that didn't fit. Is that a common experience? We need to go through those things sometimes to build resilience as we grow up and find out who we are and that we're not the center of the universe. I filled my time with plenty of activities. I was always good at sports as a kid. As you can tell, I'm a massive athlete now. And I had dreams of becoming something as a kid. I thought I'd be something in sport. That's all I did, really. And I thought one day I would be a great sportsman. And I think behind that is, then I will be something. Then I'll be somebody. When I've excelled, when I've got the best I can be at this, then I'll be somebody. Then I'll find my purpose. And it wasn't until I became a Christian at the age of 21 that I really found purpose. And I didn't think of it in these terms. It's only now because I'm 64 and I can look back and go, oh, this was about finding purpose. So looking back retrospectively. At 21, I gave my life to the Lord. I went from black to white. I went from atheist to complete believer within seconds. As I prayed the prayer, it all came alive for me, and the Holy Spirit sort of was very present, and it was. I had one of those lightning bolt experiences that some have, and many have a longer journey, but I had that, and I discovered my sense of purpose, and that sense of purpose was to follow Jesus. Wherever at that moment, it's like, whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do. I'll do anything, just because you're it, I'll do that. And many of us have that and then start planning our own trajectory. And I'm following Jesus, but with what I want to do. I'll do these things because this suits me. And I've somehow made the thing. We're talking about, I've been predominantly a worship leader for many years and now leading a church and things like that. And you could go, if I become worship leading is my purpose, then where's Jesus? Jesus is in the worship, but he's kind of to the side of it a little bit. Do you know what I'm saying there? It's like worship leading that's me. That's me. But it's not, it's following Jesus. And that's just one of the things I do on that journey. Leading the church for now is one of the things I'm doing on that journey. But if he goes off in a different direction, I'm gone. He hasn't said that yet, so. But, it's the following Jesus that's the calling, not the jobs he gives us on the way there. Karen is very pastoral and counselling to people, and she happens to be a hairdresser. And through her hairdressing, she does what her calling is, or what Jesus told her to do. She's not a bad hairdresser as well, I have to say. But my purpose has to align with my following of Jesus and not just what I feel like doing. So following Jesus is like purpose with a capital P. Worship leading is purpose with a small p, if that makes any more sense. And how about you? Do you know what your purpose is? Have you been chosen to follow Christ and yet still find yourself striving to achieve success or merely trying to fit in? Are you more focused on what you do rather than why you do it? And our why is the all-important question. So our purpose with a capital P is to follow Christ. And God does give us things to do in our lives which serve our purpose, like teaching, nursing, engineering. Any job you do, we learn to do that, as John will say in his discipleship training course, which is coming up in November. We learn to be in two places at the same time. You're at work and you're with God. You're at play and you're with God. We learn as Christians to be in two places at the same time. I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and we have this balance that we have. Sometimes we separate the secular and the spiritual, and we have, I'm doing my job now and it's in the secular. I'm doing church now and it's in the spiritual, and everything is spiritual. You get the idea out of your head that there's some separation, that there's a difference between what we do in our worldly thing that's just to earn our money and do family or whatever, and suddenly when we do something spiritual. Everything's spiritual and God sees it all. And as Christians, we're called to do everything on our path of following Christ. But today, I'm just thinking about this area, and think about this area together. And by the way, for those who don't know, you can take what I say with a pinch of salt. I don't claim to be the fountain of all knowledge on anything. These are my thoughts on this subject. And you can take it on board or not. And if God speaks to you through it, then fantastic. And if he doesn't, then complain to Dave Turnbull. I think it's true generally that, and not just for Christians, that as human beings, our biggest moments of personal growth originate in moments of pain. And we can choose to live in the pain, we can choose to try and escape the pain, or we can choose to find purpose within the pain. Romans 8:28 says, we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. What the Bible doesn't say, and understand that this is a letter to the church. What God doesn't say here is everything is good. He's not saying everything is good. He's saying I'm at work in everything, good or bad. So don't go, this is bad, therefore there's no God. That's a lot of people end up with that conclusion when things go bad. I thought it was all about everything is good. This is not good, therefore there's no God. That's not what God says here. He says everything is working together. He'll work inside everything that's going on in your life for good of those, and it's according to his purpose for us. So we have to give some attention to our purpose. God can use all circumstances, and I've certainly experienced that in my life for his purpose. And it doesn't mean it's not painful. Don't think this is a removal of pain. It's still painful, but if there's purpose in it, it's different. We do tend to read scripture and put ourselves in the first person, I think. So we think this is the scripture, it's to me, it's for me, and it's written for the church, to the church. It's not about me or to me. And it's not about God working solely for my personal benefit. The things that you go through can be for the benefit of the church. And that may sound unfair. That's just the way it is. And because something that I'm going through, I would rather not go through it. But if I am going to go through it, I want it to be a benefit for the body of Christ. And that's what I'm saying here. God has an eternal perspective, and we put everything in our lifespan of 75, 85, 95, whatever years you're expecting to live for. But God has this eternal perspective of building the kingdom on earth, building towards the day that he comes back, which a lot of people are feeling like, if now's not it, I'd like it to be it, because it's a mess. God can work through your pain for the good of others. And in this context, Paul is writing to the church, working together to help others find their calling, which will be aligned to God's purpose for them. As an example, how many people do you know who've become counsellors because they've gone through some sort of personal trauma themselves? Most counsellors I know have either had a breakdown or have lived with somebody who's had a breakdown, and they find their calling out of that pain. And they have empathy because of that. Their pain is still their pain, but they found a purpose for it. A few weeks ago, we had our fantastic baptism service, and it was just such a lovely day. And God was really at work there, and that was a good thing. And God was at work, and all you could see was a good thing going on there. That was all good. There was nothing bad, apart from a couple of dodgy sausages that were Dave Caddick's fault, apparently. But nobody died, Dave. Nobody died, it's fine. Dodgy burgers? Oh, that must have been Turnbull then. It wasn't me. Ownership, Dave, ownership. That's fine. But up until that point, those people who've been baptized, some have been Christians for a long time, some have been Christians for a short time. But was God only at work in the moment that we baptized them? No, he was at work in the bad stuff as well. God is at work in everything. He is at work when they were their worst. When they were the furthest away from their God they could be, God was at work. And why was God at work? Because those people will go on to bless the body of the church. But their pain will still be the pain. Their regret will still be their regret. They'll learn to deal with it. But they go on to bless the body of Christ and people who do not yet know Christ. God was at work in the pain, but they didn't see it till the baptism. When unexpected things show up, many people believe that they're done. It's easy in that moment to let our pain become the eraser of our lives. And when trials come, which they will, we have to determine what to do in our pain and what we do with our pain. In our pain, we can learn to trust God and gain perspective. It might not be natural for us to decide what to do with our pain. Our natural tendency with pain is to look for something to protect us from it. And that's not a wrong thing. We can do that as well. We don't want pain. Nobody invites it. But when it comes, we can ask God to help us in it and find purpose. The thing is, as human beings, we don't really mind pain. That might seem strange. But if you look at a ballet dancer's feet, she goes through tremendous pain for a purpose. Childbirth. Anybody who's watched their wife give birth realizes that women are mentally unstable. Because 2 years later, they're going, I want to have another baby. You think, I'm sorry, but if men had to give birth, the human race would be wiped out in a generation, because there's no way we'd go through that twice. Well, that pain has a purpose. And of course, if you've ever seen a guitarist's fingers, I'll leave that there. Comparable to childbirth, I would say. Learning to play the guitar. Athletes go through enormous pain, but for a purpose. We don't mind pain. What we hate is pain without a purpose. What was the point in that? Scientists go through the pain of failure hundreds of times before they make a breakthrough. Photographers take thousands of photographs before they get the one that is a great photograph. And most of our important growth as Christians, or not as Christians, will come about as a result of pain. When Jesus is talking to his disciples about his forthcoming death, which they still don't really get, he says, I've told you all this so you may have peace in me here on earth. You will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. I think all but one of the disciples died a martyr's death. And And if there was no purpose behind that, that would just been a huge waste of time and life. And if there is no Christ, if there's no resurrection, Paul says we are to be pitied more than anybody, because we're just wasting our time and lives and effort. But we have a purpose, and the disciples had a purpose. And if the disciples hadn't died martyrs' deaths, you and I wouldn't be sitting here today. And maybe you're thinking, I wish I had been sitting at home today, but here you are anyway. So Jesus went through all his pain, and he's talking about the pain to come as well, for a purpose. And Jesus is our model. Jesus is the person we look to, God as man, going through pain. And when Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow me, it's not just like I've got a nice little silver cross. I won't get it out because it'll upset the microphone. That nice little silver cross. It's not picking up a little bit of jewelry. There's pain in carrying your cross. But he has overcome it. And we can find some glorious triumphs if we will embrace it and ask him for purpose. We will have trials and sorrows, Christian or not. But who's better equipped to deal with the trial and sorrow? Somebody who has God or somebody who has no God? Who has the hope? In 1941, Viktor Frankl, a medical doctor from Vienna, married Tilly Grosser. In 1942, they were arrested by the Nazis, forced to abort their child, then transported to a concentration camp. After spending 3 years in various concentration camps, Viktor was finally set free on April 27, 1945. After returning to Vienna, he discovered that his wife, mother, and brother had all died in concentration camps. Most people in Viktor's situation would have huddled under the umbrella of safety and security, never to emerge from their pain. But not Viktor. In 1946, Viktor dictated his book, Man's Search for Meaning, in only 9 days. By his death in 1997, the book had sold 9 million copies. During his lifetime, Viktor Frankl wrote 39 books, received 29 honorary doctorates, and taught at 4 universities. How could he do so much good after experiencing so much pain? His words from his book, Man's Search for Meaning, give you some perspective. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. Pain reveals God's purpose. Pain, I'm not saying that pain is God's purpose. And you say, why has God given me this? God hasn't given it to you. There's no pain or discomfort or anxiety in God. He hasn't given it to you. But we live in a broken world where stuff happens. But in our pain, if we truly seek to follow Christ, reveal your purpose in this. When Christ went off to pray, and he said, I'd rather not do this, but rather your will than mine. Is that our attitude? It's hard. And some people have said the Christian life's easy, but it's not. But we have to push through. And it becomes glorious when we do that. Pain is painful. And I'm not saying God always removes pain. But God has this amazing ability to turn something awful into something beautiful. God turns addicts into counselors who stop other people being addicts. God can turn an abuser into a safe place if they seek God. As you know, I'll use myself as an example again. I'm not doing this to blow my own trumpet, but when I was diagnosed with cancer earlier this year, I did have to ask God. And he granted me perfect peace, as I told you before. I wasn't worried about it, but I said, I wanted to know how can I use this time to draw people to you? And not, my concern was that people would go, see, there's no God because you're supposed to be a leader of a church and you're sick. So my concern was, how will I best represent you in this and give me some purpose? And I have to tell you that I've had more positive conversations about God because of having cancer than I had before. And God didn't give me cancer. That's ridiculous. But my point was at the beginning, I said, and you don't know when you get that diagnosis, it's a bit of a strange one, but whether I die or whether I live is not the point. Whether this ends in death tomorrow or in 20 years is not the point. Or whether I get ill but my point is, how do I represent you well? Because this doesn't change the fact that God is God. Nothing in your life changes the fact that God is God, whatever you've gone through. And it made me closer to God than I've ever been, I think. I had more peace in those few months of diagnosis than I've had in my entire life. And it made me God, when I was asking the question of God, how do I do this? God's sort of response was, well, what's really changed? What's really changed? And I was like, well, nothing really. I was always going to die. Just might be a little earlier than I'd planned. I'm not planning to. I'm all good, by the way, for those who don't know. But what's really changed? And why does it change just because it happens in my life? Because suddenly it becomes important when it's me, but those thousands who've died in Gaza don't have that impact on me. They don't make me challenge God in the same way. Well, I don't have that sort of empathy with others just because it's happened to me. But I found a purpose within that. And it wasn't even that painful, if I'm honest. I've had worse things. I've had worse toothache. But finding purpose in it is important. The joy and peace that I've found in the conversation I've had with people as a result of some degree of pain has far outweighed the pain itself. We need to commit to sharing the power of hope and transformation, using our pain as a way to connect and tell our story fearlessly, not with shame that we shouldn't feel this way because we're a Christian. We shouldn't have pain because we're a Christian. We shouldn't have mental pain. That's another story I could tell you. We have to find the purpose in it. And why? 2 Corinthians, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, he comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort those in trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. There's a so that. There is a purpose. God comforts us for a purpose. It's meant for sharing. If you've received any comfort from God, you're meant to share that with people. Tell people. And Paul talks about the thorn in his side, and we don't know exactly what that was. But it's safe to say that it was likely an illness, maybe migraines, or maybe some thought process or depression even that he went through. I don't know. But he lived with constantly. And in Corinthians, when he writes this letter, he talks about this thorn in his side that he just was frustrated by. And he says, 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. How contrary is that to the world that we live in? I need to be weak in order to see God's power at work. That is not the way we're brought up as men. Not in my generation, certainly. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I'm weak, then I am strong. Nobody can doubt the impact that Paul had on the world. He embraced his pain and sought purpose in it. Mark Batterson, who's a pastor in Washington, says this in his book, Soul Print. It's not our experiences that make us or break us. It's our interpretation of and explanation of those experiences that ultimately determines who we become. Your explanations are more important than your experiences. Doesn't mean we'll always find answers. And there's a difference between answers for your pain and purpose in your pain. Don't let the confusion of pain clarify the purpose of it. Another lady, a Candace, not the one that we all know and love. Although, oddly enough, she did found an organisation. She's called Candice Lightner. She found an organisation called MAD, which I find... It's MADD. Candice Lightner founded MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, after her 13-year-old daughter, Carrie, was tragically killed by a drunk driver. Carrie was on her way to a church carnival when a 47-year-old man, fresh off a three-day drinking binge, ploughed into Carrie, tossing her body 125 feet. The man who hit Carrie had 3 drunk driving convictions and had recently been released on bail for a hit-and-run drunk driving accident. But in the midst of her pain, Candy found the courage to not only work through her pain, but to do something with it. She founded MADD to raise awareness, push for new legislation, and save others from the devastation of drunk driving. Candy's response redeemed her pain for a greater purpose. Only God is capable of using every bad pain to produce a very good purpose. That doesn't mean it's easy, nor does it mean you'll find answers for your pain. It simply means that the redemption of pain for a far bigger purpose is possible. She's on the way to a church event. And that would make you question your faith, wouldn't it? Any of us, me. It'd make me question my faith if that happened to a child of mine. Of course it would. But if I couldn't find a purpose in it, then it would be probably the end of me. But she's found purpose, and she's gone on to help many other people. Before we move on, I'll leave you this one guy who's a favourite of, I know Graham likes this guy. When you may be thinking, well, you don't know, Dave, you haven't had my life. That is true, I haven't had your life, and I don't know what pain you're currently going through, and I don't want to belittle anything in any way. I'm just saying that if you don't find some purpose in it, you will struggle a lot more. But this guy, Nick Vujicic, is an Australian evangelist and started a movement. And you think, if you're thinking, I can't because I've had all these setbacks, all these things that I can't do anything, I'll just leave you this and then we'll move into a time of prayer.
When you're in school, when you're growing up in life, it actually sort of matters to people how you look. And then it matters to you because it matters to others. And the fear that we have is that we're going to be alone, that we're not good enough. And, we have to change ourselves. And, so many people put me down and say, Nick, you look too weird and no one's really your friend and you can't do this and you can't do that. And I couldn't change anything. It's not like just fixing my hair one day and everything's fine. I couldn't change my circumstance. I couldn't just one day wake up and say, hey, give me arms and legs. I need arms and legs. It was so hard because people put me down. And I started believing that I was not good enough. I started believing that I was a failure, that I'd never ever be somebody who people would like or people would accept. And it was so hard, man. I thought to myself, I can't go on the soccer field like everybody else, and I can't ride my bike, and I can't skateboard, and all these sort of things. And I started getting depressed. I thought, what kind of purpose do I have to live? I mean, are you just here to live to die? I mean, is there not a purpose for me? Is there not a purpose in life? And I had questions and no answers. And I asked my mum and dad, why did this happen? I asked doctors, why did this happen? And they don't know. There are some things in life that are out of your control that you can't change and you got to live with. The choice that we have, though, is either to give up or keep on going. I want to ask you, what are you going to believe? Are you going to believe in yourself? Are you going to believe everybody else's judgment on you? How did I get from depressed to who I am today? Because I tell you, I was depressed. When I was age 8, I used to concentrate on the things I didn't have. I wish I had arms and legs, and I wish I could do this. But what can I do? You see, I have a choice. I can either be angry for not having arms and legs or be thankful for my chicken drumstick. And I'm traveling around the world. It's amazing. But I had to ask myself a couple questions. And the first question was really, who am I? Who am I? I'm Nick Vujicic, but who is that? Because there's nothing good about having no limbs. But I love my life. Do you want to know why? Because I've seen the purpose. When you see me for the first time, many of you felt sorry for me. Do you feel sorry for me anymore? No. Why? Because you know who I am. But don't you remember I have no arms and no legs? Would you want to be my friend?
And if you struggle with this whole concept, then continue to struggle with it, but continue to struggle with it in prayer. And ask these questions maybe just to set you off. How could the story of your pain offer hope to somebody else? Who needs to hear your story? How has your pain changed your attitude towards others who are suffering? Is there something you can create or produce or get involved in that would be a resource of hope for others? How is your pain prompting you to make changes in how you live your life? If you're in pain currently, what is God saying to you in this moment? What would honor and glorify Him within your pain?